Hi, my name is Gajraj, and I'm so happy to be here today to present as part of the Royal Canadian College of Organists, Organist Launchpad. I'm currently a doctoral student at McGill University, where I'm researching Caribbean organ repertoire and performance practice. I'm so excited to be here today to present about creative concert programming in the 21st century. When I began performing and was faced with the decision to put together programs, I wanted to showcase works outside of the typical canon of organ repertoire. While there is always and will always be room for the familiar works that we all know and love, I also am very passionate about performing works by underrepresented and minority composers. To start with, I will share some resources with you that have helped me explore a more diverse body of organ repertoire, and I'll present a few examples of concert programs that feature those composers. During the early COVID lockdowns, the England-based Society of Women Organists compiled a 200-page directory of women organ composers and liturgical church music composers in general. These composers range from the 1500s to the present day, and this directory includes discographies, score publishers, and even direct links to purchase scores. This is the most thorough list of women organ composers that I have encountered, and I frequently refer back to it for inspiration and education. This, along with everything else, will be linked below. Another great resource was compiled by Calvert Johnson from the Atlanta chapter of the American Guild of Organists. This document is an extensive bibliography of organ works by African Americans and the African diaspora, including composers from Cuba, Ghana, Haiti, South Africa, Nigeria, Jamaica, and England. Two other really useful resources, while not organ-specific, are the Composer Diversity Database and the New Muses Project. The Composer Diversity Database is available online through the Institute for Composer Diversity and contains multiple different criteria such as ethnicity, gender orientation, sexual orientation, location, and just basic information as in, are they living or deceased? The New Muses Project was co-founded in 2021 by Gloria Yin, Joe Laurentius, and Rihanna Cockrell. This incredible database helps you find new composers to experience. You simply type in your favorite composer from the Western canon, and this program suggests other composers that you would like, but those of more diverse genders, locations, and ethnicities. These links, along with the organ-specific directories, are all included below. So to help demonstrate how to use all of these directories, I will create two sample organ programs with works entirely selected from the two above directories. One program would be suitable for a more Baroque instrument and one for a more romantic or symphonic instrument. So the first program I will present will be for the more symphonic instrument, and these programs will also be included below in a PDF. So I would open this program with Jewell by Violet George Bowers. It's a very sparkly, fast-moving gem that uses a variety of different registrational colors. Jewell was composed by the African-American composer Violet George Bowers, who was born in 1936. She studied organ with Paul Cooper, and she was professor of music at Dillard University. Then I would play Ancient Sunlight by Judith Bingham. This piece begins in a flowing and meditative manner and builds up to a fast-paced, frantic crescendo with a solo on the pedal reeds, ending with full organ. Judith Bingham, the composer, was born in 1952, and she is a British composer and singer. She studied composition and singing at the Royal Academy of Music and had a long career singing with the BBC singers for many years before leaving to concentrate fully on composing. She has written for many professional and amateur choirs, and she is a prolific writer of church and organ music. She was awarded an honorary doctorate by the University of Aberdeen and also appointed Officer of the Order of the British Empire in 2020 for services to music. Next, I would put Fantasy by Eugene Wilson White Hancock. This piece is quirky, dissonant, virtuosic, and fun for both performer and listener. Eugene Hancock was a great organist, composer, and professor. He studied organ with William Green and Marilyn Mason, among others, and composition with Seth Bingham and Joseph Goodman. Dr. Hancock was a professor of music at the Borough of Manhattan Community College from 1970 until his death in 1994. Many of his works were published and are in anthologies such as the Anthology of Art Songs by Black American Composers, which is compiled by Willis C. Patterson, and also the African American Organ Music Anthology, edited by Mickey Thomas Terry. Dr. Hancock was an active member of the American Guild of Organists, holding various positions in the New York City AGO chapter in his life. He was the presenter and performer for the AGO educational cassette of organ music of Black composers, and he was an authority on the organ music of Black composers. Next, I would have The Air for Organ by William B. Cooper. This gentle air is beautiful in its simplicity, a meditative piece that could work well both in concert or during a church service. Born in Philadelphia, William Cooper attended the Philadelphia College of Performing Arts for his bachelor's and master's in music, and he received his doctorate from Columbia Pacific University in California. He received an honorary doctorate of sacred music in 1988 from Christ Theological Seminary. He taught music for many decades at Bennett College and Hampton University, as well as in the public system. He wrote music for organ, voice, chorus, orchestra, and ballet. Next, I would program Hell und Dunkel by Sofia Gubaidulina. This piece is full of virtuosic runs, cluster glissandi, and a wide mixture of registrational colors. Sofia Gubaidulina is a Soviet Russian composer whose works meld Russian and Central Asian regional styles with the Western classical tradition. She discovered music at the age of 5, and she fell in love with composition. She studied music in the city of Kazan, the capital of her home republic. She had lessons at the Kazan Music Academy, studied piano and composition at the conservatory, and then pursued composition at the Moscow Conservatory. Her works often deal with themes of spirituality, and she is deeply spiritual and believes in the transformative power of music. After winning the Frontiers of Knowledge Award Laureate in Contemporary Music, she said, quote, "The art of music is capable of touching and approaching mysteries and laws existing in the cosmos and in the world. This spirituality is evident in the above piece, Hell und Dunkel, or Light and Darkness, which deals with the struggle between and convergence of light and darkness. Her works are mostly polytonal and contain strongly accented rhythms." Next, I would have the Suite for Organ No. 1 by Florence Price. Structured in 4 movements of fantasy, fuguetta, air, and toccata, this Suite for Organ is an incredible addition to any concert program. Florence Price was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1887. She attended the New England Conservatory, where she studied with George Whitefield Chadwick, who used African-American folk melodies and rhythms in his works. Responding to Dvorak's encouragement to American composers to utilize African-American harmonies and rhythms in their compositions. After her studies, Price took a position at Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, Georgia, until it became too dangerous as a result of the rise of violence in Atlanta with the growing impact of the Jim Crow era. Price chose to leave her job in Atlanta and return to Little Rock, Arkansas, where she got married and started a family until Little Rock also became too dangerous as racial tensions were rising rapidly. Shortly after arriving in Chicago, Price joined the R. Nathaniel Dett Club of Music and the Allied Arts. In 1932, Florence Price won first prize in the Wanamaker competition with her symphony in E minor, and thus became the first female composer of African descent to have a symphonic work performed by a major national symphony orchestra. In 2009, a large collection of her works and papers were found in an abandoned house in Illinois, which was her summer home. Dozens of her scores were found, including her 2 violin concertos and her 4th symphony. Her music is in an American idiom, often utilizing rhythm and syncopation of African American spirituals. Finally, I would play the Arioso and Finale by David Hurd. This piece opens with the meditative modal Arioso and closes with a triumphant, dissonant, joyful, toccata-like finale. Dr. Hurd is the director of music at the Church of St. Mary the Virgin in Times Square, New York City. He attended the High School of Music and Art, the Juilliard College, and Oberlin College, and holds honorary doctorates from Berkeley Divinity School at Yale, Seabury Western Theological Seminary, and Church Divinity School of the Pacific. In 1977, he became the first person ever to receive first prizes in both organ performance and in organ improvisation from the International Congress of Organists. Next, I will present the program that would be suitable for a Baroque instrument, or an instrument without the expression pedal. I would start with the Prelude and Fugue on O Traurig Kite, O Herzeleid, by Ethel Smythe. This piece is a prelude and fugue on the Good Friday hymn, O Darkest Woe, O Heart's Pain. It begins with a slow, beautiful prelude full of angst, and the fugue builds up into an agonizing cry before ending with a slow, mournful adagio section. Dame Ethel Smythe was an English composer and a member of the women's suffrage movement. She studied with Alexander Ewing when she was 17, who introduced her to the music of Wagner and Berlioz. She fought with her father bitterly for a year before he allowed her, as a woman, to continue her musical education at the Leipzig Conservatory. While she was at the Leipzig Conservatory, she met Dvorak, Grieg, and Tchaikovsky. Her opera Der Wald was the first opera by a woman to be produced at New York's Metropolitan Opera, and for over a century was the only opera by a woman composer ever produced at the Metropolitan Opera. She was alternately praised and criticized for writing music that was considered too masculine for a lady composer. She wrote extensive memoirs in which she would lament about either being too masculine or too feminine for music critics, and detailed her love affairs and heartbreaks as an open lesbian in the 19th and early 20th centuries. She was an avid member of the women's suffrage movements, composing the anthem of the suffragette movement, the March of the Women. Next, I would have 12 Country Dances by Ignatius Sancho. This was originally written for harpsichord, but it works really well on the organ as well. The dances contain titles that give us an insight into what country life would have looked like for Sancho, such as Culford Health Camp, Trip to Dillington, Strawberries and Cream, All of One Mind, and Mungo's Delight. Charles Ignatius Sancho was a British abolitionist, writer, and composer. He was born on a slave ship in the Atlantic and was sold into slavery in the Spanish colony of New Granada. After his parents died, Sancho's owner took the 2-year-old orphan to a family in Greenwich, England, where he remained for 18 years. The Duke of Montagu was a frequent visitor to this house in Greenwich, and he was very impressed by Sancho's intellect, frankness, and amiability. The Duke would bring Sancho books from his personal library and taught him how to read. So when Sancho ran away, he fled to that Montagu house in Blackheath, London, where the Duke continued to encourage Sancho's interest in literature, art, and music. Sancho worked then as a butler for the Duchess of Montagu for a while, but he eventually left and started his own business as a shopkeeper, while also starting to write and publish various essays, plays, and books. Sancho quickly became involved in the beginnings of the British abolitionist movement, which sought to outlaw both the slave trade and slavery itself. Since Sancho was a male property owner, he was legally qualified to vote in a general election. So in 1774, he actually became the first known British African to have voted in Britain. Sancho died in 1780 with his Letters of the Late Ignatius Sancho, an African, edited and published 2 years after his death, being the first published letter collection by a writer of African descent. Next, I would have the Partita Sopra Veni Creator Spiritus by Terra de Mares Oyens. Terra de Mares Oyens was a Dutch composer. She studied at the Conservatorium van Amsterdam with a major in piano. After graduation, she became the music director of the Reformed Church community of Hilversum. She wrote a variety of new hymn melodies and over 200 works of music, many commissioned by the Dutch Ministry of Culture and various broadcasting networks. In the 1960s, she became interested in electronic music and studied at the Institute of Sonology in Utrecht. In 1978, she became an instructor at the Conservatory in Jewell, where she taught for over a decade. Next, I would have Trois Esquisses by Liv Benedict Bjornboe. These 3 sketches for organ make use of the wide range of the instrument. The first esquisse contains a driving rhythm with relentless chordal patterns, accelerating towards the end. The second esquisse is a minimalist dialogue on flutes with a meditative section on a solo reed. And the third esquisse again begins with a repetitive pattern played by flutes, which gets taken over by reeds, gradually crescendoing into a finale on full organ. Liv Benedicte Bjørnboe is a contemporary Norwegian composer and organist. She was born into a family of artists in Trondheim, Norway, and studied church music at the Department of Music in the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim. She has worked in multiple churches in Trondheim and has given many organ concerts throughout Europe. Her music has been performed on Norwegian radio and TV. So these two sample programs will be linked below. And in general, when I am structuring a concert program, I try to vary the mood and volume of the pieces so that there are not two intense pieces for full organ next to each other, nor two long static pieces next to each other with only soft flutes that could put you at risk of putting your audience to sleep. I also like to begin and end with louder pieces, especially making sure that the final piece is grand enough to signal that the program has ended. I hope you have enjoyed hearing about these composers and that you will maybe try programming some of this repertoire as well. There are so many hidden gems written for the organ that lie in obscurity, and I'm so excited to have been able to share some of them with you today. Join me next time on Organist Launchpad for structuring multidisciplinary events.